Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the October 23rd, 2017 workshop of the Orlando City Council. Sorry, I was running just a minute late. We have moved all of the executive offices that reside on 3 are now on 9. So I didn't anticipate the elevator ride takes just a little bit longer than walking down from 3. So anybody visiting the legal offices or the CAO's office or the mayor's office needs to go to 9 rather than 3 for the next, Byron, 3 months or so, I guess? Something like that, 3 or 4 months.
Forever.
All right.
Forever.
Okay, we obviously continue to work to diversify our economy and support our economic development business organizations, not-for-profits, and we heard from 3 of them at our last workshop, and we have 3 more today. So Lillian Scott Payne, no hyphen, is our Business Development Division Manager, and she is going to introduce the partners that will be presenting today.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners, Mayor. Today we're back for round 2 of our presentations from our economic development organizations. As you know, we partner with these agencies to provide vital services to our business community. These agencies focus on things like technical assistance, business coaching, and providing funding opportunities to our startups and our established businesses. We rely heavily on their services and their expertise. At 2 o'clock today, we will present for approval of the renewal of our funding agreements for most of these organizations. This morning, we will hear from Dr. Tom O'Neill, who's the Executive Director of the UCF Business Incubation Program, Lieutenant General Thomas Baptiste, President of the National Center for Simulation, and we will start the morning off with welcoming Tim Giuliani. Tim was recently selected President and CEO of the Orlando Economic Partnership. The OEP is in its inaugural year as the newly merged organization of the Orlando Economic Development Commission and the Central Florida Foundation. So, Tim?
Morning, Tim.
Welcome and congratulations.
Tim, I'm just quickly looking at your slides. Are you going to talk about the merger a little bit in the organization now? Because not everybody understands where we're at in that.
Yes, I wanted to provide the slides for some context of the last year, but I thought I'd talk mostly about the merger. This is my first time in front of the council. I thought it would be a good opportunity to introduce myself, but also to talk about where we are in that process.
Perfect.
Okay. So I moved back to Florida for this opportunity. It was the opportunity to come back home to Florida, and I had been in the Research Triangle for the last couple years and in Gainesville, Florida prior. So I had worked in previous stints with organizations that were considered merged at some point in their history and did economic development and did chamber work in the same offices, sharing staff, etc. And so I know what this looks like on the other side, but we're going through a merger currently. So the merger between the Central Florida Partnership and the Metro Orlando EDC was official as of January 31. I started in the position of CEO on March 6th. So since that time, our fiscal year for our organization is October 1. So leading up into the last couple weeks, we've been focused on bringing people into one office instead of 2. We have now one accounting system. We have one CRM system, one set of policies for employees. We've been working with our board to establish some direction. We've been trying to get out and to meet with all of the stakeholders. So we're in the same building now. We have taken care of and accounted for efficiencies in the organization where we had some redundancy when you put them both together. There's a few positions that fell into that category. And then as this first slide I'll show you, one scenario we're working with is the Central Florida Partnership focused on 7 counties in Central Florida, and they're highlighted here for you. The former EDC worked with 4 of those counties and the city of Orlando. So that was Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and Lake. Whereas the Central Florida Partnership worked with those local governments, but added Polk, Volusia, and Brevard. So we're trying to to feel we are chartered for the 7-county region, and we certainly think we have something to add from a regional perspective when it comes to economic development, transportation, particularly when we talk about the future of Sunrail. And when you look at an economic development project, and the one that we're probably all most familiar with currently is Amazon looking for a second headquarters, certainly larger projects are going to have an impact throughout that 7-county area. So we're working to build those relationships and to better understand the needs of those local governments. And I will put this slide up. This is the slide that was adopted by our executive committee and our board. If you will, this is how we're structured. And so you see the top line, which is really the mantra of the organization, is all about a regional approach to broad-based prosperity. And this is a little bit new language from either of the previous organizations. It's looking at how do we go forward in a more inclusive way and work on broad-based prosperity for all. And so that's a more explicit statement of where we're going than anything else I could show you. I think some of those things are a continuation of what we've been doing, and in other cases it's going to be rethinking how we go about, for instance, supporting entrepreneurs in a better way. I want to get into to having you understand this, Mayor, to your point, when you put the merged organizations together, this is what shook out. You know, this explains to you what stayed and what didn't stay, and in one case, what was added. So the first is economic development. I think you all are familiar with the work of the EDC in the past of recruiting businesses, working with businesses to expand in the market, and also working from time to time to retain companies here in the market that may be being recruited elsewhere. And we certainly do some of that work. So we're going to organize from this economic development perspective into different clusters. For instance, aviation will likely be one of those clusters. Advanced technologies is another one of those clusters. And so what we're looking at, instead of just saying how much are we going to spend on recruitment of companies versus expansion of companies, we're actually going to bring the industry leaders and partners that you're going to hear from later today together to better understand the cluster makeup, to understand what gaps exist. Is it a talent pipeline gap? Do we need to be working to produce more of a certain type of engineer, for instance, to better understand what the needs are of the companies that are here, which will ultimately make us more competitive for companies looking at our market. So we are going to, in my mind, become a little bit more sophisticated in this approach to business development and not just focus on recruitment and expansion, but work on how we better support them as a whole. Advocacy and public policy will be another area. So what are the big issues for the region, and how do we champion those issues on behalf of the region? And so we'll certainly be in consultation with our local government partners on this, as we will our private sector investors. But we are not continuing the same relationship with Business Force that existed with the Central Florida Partnership. There are board members of that entity that are interested in continuing it. However, it's unaffiliated with the partnership, and I'll have no role with that entity. They decided they want to continue, and we decided we wanted to continue without that arm. So we will not have a PAC. Branding the region is a big area of emphasis. In fact, we recently took a trip with Mayor Dyer included to New York to meet with various media outlets to talk about Orlando. The news articles are still coming in, but we've already seen a number of those articles published, and I have a couple of those examples later in the presentation. We do run the Orlando Regional Chamber of Commerce, Orlando Inc., and so that organization will remain, and everything else I'm talking about is really focused on the regional economy. The chamber is really going to be focused on small and medium-sized businesses and a return of an investment to them. So it'll be more business services, programs, educational opportunities, networking opportunities for businesses. So it's much more about strengthening businesses, whereas everything else you're hearing me talk about is more how do we develop the economy and the community. The last item on the strategic initiatives line is new, and that's advancing transportation solutions. So we are actually bringing on board Jim Hartman, who some of you may know. He was a Seminole County manager and prior to that, assistant county manager for Orange County. I got the chance to work with him in Raleigh. He was the Wake County manager in my term there. And so he will be staffing this group. And the idea is to bring together representatives from the private sector, representatives from the independent sector, and from transportation agencies to add a complementary voice. For instance, last week we hosted a group from Tampa that is interested in Sunrail. And so all of us, well, not all of us, a few of us from our organizations were able to better understand the issues facing Sunrail and the opportunities we have to support it. So this will be, how do we engage the business community more in a long-term kind of basis when it comes to advancing transportation solutions, whether that's adding capacity, reducing congestion. What can we add to the conversation? Maybe it's helping to organize advocacy trips to Tallahassee or Washington. We want to be a partner in that process of helping us with transportation solutions. And then I would point to the next line. We have two C3 entities that are with us through the merger. One came from each of the organizations previous. So we have a foundation, just hired Dr. Dale Brill to lead our research, regional leadership, community development foundation. So Leadership Orlando is part of this foundation, as is all the research we'll be doing. And I have a slide in your packet to talk about the initial analysis we've done if Amazon were to build a second headquarters here in our region, of what the economic impact would be. And so Dale's job is going to be to keep us all better informed of the trends, the opportunities, as we look to redefine success as it comes to broad-based prosperity. He's going to help to add some research horsepower to that conversation so that we can better understand how you create a more inclusive city from an economic standpoint. We will certainly get into the talent pipeline conversation. That is the number one criteria companies look at when deciding and making a corporate relocation or expansion decision. So we know there's a lot of organizations that are very involved in this conversation and do a really nice job here in Central Florida. And we certainly want to be a complement to that existing network of organizations and priorities. And if there's something we can add to that conversation, for instance, maybe we focus on bringing in national foundation money to the market to support what goes on in our area. That's just an example. But when we find a role for us to play, we know it's important. We already have a C3 foundation that's set up that could speak to this need. We'll do it at that time, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and do something that's already being done in Central Florida. And then you could certainly look at the values that our Joint Alignment Committee established. It was actually the first question I asked to make sure that they were serious about these values, because I'm going to take them very seriously as the leader of the organization. But you can see that the inclusive nature ties right into the values, being visionary and helping Central Florida see what we can become and what we need to be, being disciplined, because obviously there's a lot of different areas the organization is going to be involved in, and how do we make sure we're accountable for those results, and then to be collaborative. And a good example is Tom, who will follow me. We work together on defense-related opportunities from an economic standpoint. And so hopefully today in some of these presentations, you'll see how we're working with other organizations. So Mayor, I can get into some of the other slides, but that hits the merger, hopefully what people are most in tune with. So let me advance into the rest of the presentation. This is our preliminary analysis of what it would mean to Central Florida if Amazon did place their second headquarters here. As I think all of you are aware, we submitted the bid that was due last Thursday. It's a very exciting opportunity for us. We feel very good that our market can compete, and it's been so nice to see all of the support for what this could mean for our community and for people that are growing up, much like my three kids, of what type of jobs are going to be available to them. And so if you just look at some of these numbers, they're talking about 50,000 jobs over a 15-year period. And obviously, if any of us were trying to make those calculations, you're modeling out quite a bit into the future. And so when we do the modeling, that's a conservative modeling of this, we just wanted to give you a glimpse. The RFP doesn't talk about what it would mean for construction jobs, what it would mean for state and local tax revenue, what it would mean for the indirect and induced jobs that come with the primary employer, like an Amazon headquarters, and what it would mean to the labor market from a payroll of how much money would be put into the economy via payroll from Amazon. So you can see these numbers are astounding. What I can share with you is the data with the state is reliable to about 1995 from an economic development project sense. And when we look back, this would be the largest project, obviously, since 1995. And in fact, it would be 6 times the largest project ever in the state. So you all should know that every city in the country is having the same conversation. But we do feel we have a very strong proposal that was submitted to Amazon on behalf of our region, and that we should be competitive in that process. So that's a timely topic that I knew you would be interested in. It speaks to the services that we provide to the city of Orlando. They're really in 4 buckets: the economic development work that I just outlined for you. I'm going to show you a slide in a second on marketing branding of Orlando. You don't know the half of it campaign that the city has been supportive of. Film and TV perspective, we do the permitting for the region, including the city, and then the data and research that I just showed you a highlight of, and the work that Dr. Dale Brill will be doing now that he's here. He started last Monday, so he's very new on the job. So in that economic development category, let me show you over the last year, the organization had, the first column is about the goals, second column is about the actual, and the third column is the variance from that. So you can see, as a region, we performed well, particularly on the number of jobs. The capital investment is a record year, largely due to Amazon's distribution center that they decided to put in Lake Nona, in addition to the KPMG facility that's within the city of Orlando. The average wage number is one that we want to see higher. Amazon's distribution center, for instance, had a big effect on that. A majority of the jobs are not high-wage jobs, albeit the huge capital investment that's coming into the market, so there was certainly a trade-off there. And so as we look to attain the goals going into next year, that's an area we're paying attention to. And that obviously impacts the payroll number, not off by much on the total payroll because we exceeded on the overall jobs number. And then we're very proud of our film department for doubling the number of production days. And for your clarification, permitted production days means on public space. Non-permitted production days is on private property, which is the distinction between those two outcomes. I could show you a little bit about some of the companies that selected our region for either a relocation or for an expansion of their business. And obviously, as we work with companies, you never know what project that site selection consultant or company is going to be working on next. So, for instance, as we went through the process of helping Amazon with their distribution center needs, obviously we had no idea that a couple months later they'd be coming out with an RFP for a second headquarters. So putting a good foot forward on behalf of the region is important every single time we get the call or we find a lead that we need to pursue. So we're proud of what these companies will add to Central Florida, particularly in the city of Orlando. I would just highlight there's 2 areas that are over the top, and the capital investment number over $400 million, and also the square footage, almost 1 million square feet within the city limits. The average jobs that landed in the city of Orlando were higher than what we saw across the region. The number of production days was high within the city limits as well. And this represents a total of 8 projects that represents over 410 jobs to the city, knowing that all the jobs have an impact on the city, but just talking about the ones that are within city limits. If you kind of walk around, we talked about economic development. I want to make sure to hit on marketing. It's a big part of what we do. And if we were in any other city of America, this marketing component of what we do is especially important for us in Orlando because we do have such a strong international brand as a destination. And what we're trying to do is to build on that and say, that's the half you do know. Let us tell you about the half you don't know. And so here are some highlights since the campaign began in 2015. This goes back to January of 2015. You can see the partnerships and the press that we've gotten. All the publications. Worth is a big success story. Great publicity in Wall Street Journal and Chief Executive Magazine, among many others. In that time, we've hosted 124 prospects to Orlando. And when it comes to retention and expansion visits, we've completed 206. And that's just a part of the story that isn't told as much as the recruitment side, because that tends to make the press a lot faster than when we help a local company expand. And here's some highlights. The picture is obviously of our recent trip to New York, where Mayor Dyer and Mayor Jacobs were featured on a segment on Fox Business. We also met with the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. We've seen publications in print since we were up there on Bloomberg, Mashable, Cheddar, Quartz. You've noticed some new names. As media is changing rapidly, some of these new media outlets are becoming increasingly important, and we're paying attention to make sure we visit with them. In addition, on this trip, we made 11 site selector meetings possible as well when we had our mayors with us, and Superintendent Jenkins was on the trip as well to tell the story about Orlando, not only from a media perspective, but also to site selectors. I wanted to call out a project that we're working on as well that's important to you that happened just last week. In partnership with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, we were able to help advance the city's sustainability efforts in trying to get beyond 34% when it comes to becoming a zero-waste city. And so this picture's the launch of that activity, full engagement from the business community and new partners. So in your work of Chris Castro and others, we really felt like we were helping to add something to the city, particularly when we talk to companies and we know that they're looking for what type of fit they're going to be into the market. And again, I'll just use the common thread of Amazon through this whole thing, is they're also a company focused on sustainability. So we certainly included that in the proposal because we do have a city that's leading edge when it comes to sustainability efforts. Through the merger, want to highlight to you another element, and that's the funding. So when you look at the entire budget without including any in-kind donations that were received, the organization was 70% funded with private money and 30% funded with public money. Our focus is obviously to increase, particularly on the private side of that equation as an organization. But that is what the current breakout is. And looking ahead to this current year, it doesn't change much because in this merger, it's still going to take us another 12 months to what I'm calling normalize and to redefine success, as we just talked about. So there's a lot going on, and we should have a relatively flat year. The core metrics going forward, these numbers look somewhat familiar to you. 4,000 jobs is the goal for this coming year to help facilitate bringing those to the market through our business development team. Capital investment of $300,000. Again, last year is likely an outlier because of two significant investments that just blew that number out of the water. Average wage is important to growing our economy, so we're extra focused on higher wage jobs. And then film also consistent with where we've been. And I would just end the presentation by showing you that, giving you this presentation in the middle of, we may be merged on paper, we may be in one office, but we're very much still assimilating new members of the team, new leaders. Crystal Searcy is here with me. She came to us from Enterprise Florida. She was the number 2 there. and so brings over 20 years of experience in Florida in economic development at the state level, experience to us here in Central Florida. And she had already been making Orlando home, so she didn't have to move for this opportunity, but she's leading our business development team and our operations, and she's going to help, particularly when it comes to those cluster working groups, to better understand each cluster and their needs. Dale Brill, his picture's there from data and research perspective. We think enhancing our research capabilities keeps us grounded in data, making decisions based on what the data says, and we need that research capability. If we're going to do a better job of growing an inclusive economy, we need to understand what the best practices are and what the data is telling us so that we can be more responsive to that. And then from a film and TV, I couldn't help but including Sheena Fowler's picture. She's our film commissioner. She was also recently inducted into Full Sail University's Hall of Fame. Actually, she was announced. The induction ceremony has not happened. And we have a handful of finalists for the VP of Marketing and Branding position. So we're very much still building out the team. And at that time, Mayor, I'd end my presentation and answer any questions.
Thank you, Tim, and welcome. When did you start?
March 6th. About
So
6.
you don't have a full year in yet?
No.
You got 6 months in?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome for your first presentation here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I noticed that there was nothing said about international
Oh, yeah.
business.
Thanks for bringing that up. Let me see if I... In an effort to finish, I skipped over it. It was on the last slide. So there had not, in recent years, been a focus on international business, particularly by the former EDC. We see this as a huge opportunity given the makeup of Central Florida and the connectivity we have to international markets and the business we see that happens here that's owned by foreign-owned firms. So we've had conversations already with city staff, with Orange County staff, with the National Entrepreneurship Center to understand what's already happening in the market because we don't want to be competitive or duplicative. And so we see a direct line for foreign direct investment as a role that we could help to play of trying to attract capital into the market.
Any particular industries?
We haven't gotten that far. We've identified and we have a staff person that's tasked with putting together the proposal. We're actually working with a couple private sector partners as well that have an interest in supporting this work. So hopefully over the next 2-3 months, we'll solidify what the program looks like, what companies which countries and which industries that we'll target. Because again, you could try to boil the ocean, or you can be very specific as it relates to the opportunities we have here. Direct flights, for instance, is something we need to consider. So we will be involved in a capacity of foreign direct investment.
Because although we are the epicenter of the world, right, Mayor?
Right.
There's a couple of industries that we have not developed very well, and I think we have the right amount of people, the right visitations, and we can really capitalize. So I don't know. If later on we can sit down and talk about this, we'll be
Please.
nice. Thank you, though. Appreciate
That's great. Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart, then Commissioner Ames.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you.
I love the presentation, but just got a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. And you haven't got to answer it now, but you can just send it over to me by email. The breakdown of the public support. I guess probably since the merger, now we've got a whole different kind of formula. I'd love to see that formula. It's always been important to me that we're providing a proportional response, a proportional help to you. At the same time, I know that we've got an incredible amount of opportunity in things like Amazon. So that'd be great if you don't mind doing that.
Absolutely.
The second thing, and I've shared this with your predecessor and another person who actually shares a bloodline with me, that the performance level has always been a concern in how to measure that. I'd love to just get with you if you can come by and just share some time how you do it. It seems that when you look at a company who's going to bring people in,
Right.
there's a projection of what they bring, and the question I ask our own economic development staff is, what actually occurred? So here you got a guy who's going to bring in 200 jobs in our case, a lot of that's incentive-based. They've got 18 months to do it. What really happened? Because I'm more concerned, going back to your data, what really happened, and then what can we do to make sure not only do we attract them, but that we continue to help them make their goals because it impacts us.
Yes.
So I'd love to just pick your brain on that, and because I think we've got some incredible opportunity ahead of us. And besides being the epicenter of the world,
Right.
it's a great place to live and play. So yeah, would you do that?
We'd
do you
be
mind
happy
doing
to do that.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Ings?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Tim. Thank you so much for your presentation. But as you were speaking about Amazon HQ 2.0, what else are you guys doing? I know you said you submitted the bid. What else are you doing to attract Amazon here? And when was the bid submitted?
It was all the 4 parts of Florida that submitted the bid, all funneled through Enterprise Florida, so that there was a Florida box presented to Amazon with the state story in addition to the regional stories of Florida. And so we submitted it, I think, last Monday, so it would make it on time for a Thursday delivery to Amazon based on their deadline.
Okay, so that's been really organized through Enterprise Florida?
No. Well, they more or less grabbed all the regional presentations. They added the state information to the top and put it in a box and sent it in the mail. So we were really in control of our story here for Central Florida.
Okay. So since you're in control of your story for Central Florida, what are your next steps then?
Yeah, good question. So this process is a bit unique in that Amazon decided to release a public RFP. That's typically done in private, and typically companies aren't looking for a second headquarters. This is obviously one of the fastest growing companies in America, and so they're in a different predicament and with a different approach. So we've been following their process, and we did not. There are some cities in America, including one that sent a cactus, which was promptly returned from Amazon's headquarters. We took the approach of submitting a serious bid on behalf of our region. And so we worked tirelessly. I could tell you the team was working weekends, nights, in some fact in the middle of the night, making sure that we told the best story we could about Central Florida. And so we spent all of our time on developing the best proposal we could and submitting it to Amazon. So at this point, we've submitted not only the hard copy, but also the electronic version that they requested.
Okay, as far as location locally, are you guys able to kind of discuss that on where you're looking in the Orlando region?
So what I would like to answer with is that there are multiple locations within Central Florida that could provide a home to Amazon, or in fact a combination of those options. As a growing market, we are lucky enough to be able to include in our bid urban options, sort of neo-urban options, suburban options. So part of the strength of our bid is that we had multiple types of real estate and land available for Amazon as they go through this process.
Okay. Now,
Commissioner, your follow-up should be, what is a neo-urban option?
We all learned through the process what neo-urban was. So it's more of a new city within a city.
and you know, and I was thinking, Mayor, about District 1 out there, Commissioner Gray, you know, because that's almost like a perfect location for a headquartered like this.
How about that?
Yeah.
Smart guy.
Moving on to film and TV. How successful are you in attracting businesses in this particular industry into the Orlando, Central Florida region?
So what I can share with you, this isn't so much about recruiting companies as it is facilitating the film industry in Central Florida. And because we don't have incentives, what we do have is a great workforce, a great sort of sector within film that companies love to utilize, and we make it easy for them by having the structure that we have, that they have one central point of contact no matter where they want to film in Central Florida. So we make it easy for them to do business
Right.
and in lieu of incentives. So what I can share with you that I have in front of me is that there was in the last year, over $4 million in local film spending in the region, and that's only based on 64% of the projects that could share that type of information with us. We can share that 2 that were shot in Orlando could earn Emmy Awards this year for the visual effects in The Man in the High Castle, and National Love Has No Labels PSA have already received nominations from the Academy of Television of Arts and Sciences. And they are clearly putting an emphasis on our resources here in Central Florida. So I'm very proud of, the team facilitates permits over the whole region. It's a really interesting success story of centralized and streamlining of permitting process that you all have been a part of. So it's more facilitating that work than it is trying to recruit companies here.
Okay. My last question deals with trade missions. Are you guys really involved in those specific opportunities to go to different countries and expressing what it is that we do here locally? And then obviously it's a reciprocal effect too, because the countries that we visit, they want us to visit them as well.
Right, and we're a really nice place to visit, so we get a lot of those visits. And we coordinate through the Central Florida Office for International Trade to make sure that we're helping to provide the economic information on those visits. So we're already hosting on any given day, or I should say more like a couple a month, in our offices to give them the economic story of Central Florida. But back to the previous comment, we do not have any trade missions planned today, but we will. We want to first get a better understanding of where they should be. And fortunately, we have Crystal Searcy on the team, and she was responsible for the international program at the state level. So we have a new in-house expertise when it comes to taking trade missions, and we want them to be purposeful and business focused. So they will be planned. That's the plan here, but not as of today.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'd really like to sit down and talk more about that, because I'm thinking of countries like Brazil, also Haiti, and specifically within our Caribbean area, because there are opportunities there because they are tourists as well. And so I know that there are some reciprocal kinds of things that we too can do for their region to help bolster their economy as well.
Yeah, happy to have that conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Tim, just 2 quick things while I'm thinking about it. I don't feel like our young entrepreneurial techie community is very well integrated into the Orlando Economic Partnership. So organizations like the Orlando Tech Association. So I think that's an area that there's room for further collaboration as we move forward. And I don't need a response to that. I'm just thinking about it right now. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And being young myself, it kind of is an obvious opportunity that I want to focus on. I feel like the mix has been all about, what percentage is expansion versus recruitment of companies, and while that's important, I want to focus on how do you build the clusters and include entrepreneurs in that approach. And so right now, we're in a unique circumstance. We had, the way the organization was brought together, it was led by the incoming chair of the Central Florida Partnership and the incoming chair of the EDC. It's Robert Utsi and Sean DiMartino who worked to bring these organizations together. And their term as co-chair has just ended at the end of September. And so we talked through, how do we put them in a meaningful role? And it kind of came at the same time as a conversation about the future of OTA, which does have a relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, which is under our watch, and Thad Seymour taking a leadership role. And so Sean and Robert and Thad and I and a couple others have already, how do we bring this ecosystem together as sort of a third party, if you will, of can we use that same leadership that brought these organizations together to help create more alignment and synergies with our existing resources in our tech community? And then is there something we can add? For instance, we're in New York meeting with site selection consultants and media. Could we have brought some tech firms with us and brought them to VC firms to get more funding so they could expand their business here in Orlando? So that's the conversation we're having now. it's a little premature to jump to a conclusion, but it's certainly high on the list, and this is something I've done in Raleigh and in Gainesville prior.
And we've already had the conversation about the lack of venture capital in our region, which is an important aspect that you guys need to have
Yes.
some role in, but also under your marketing and branding aspect, having a presence in some of the right places so that we gain some notoriety for that tech
Yes.
ecosystem. And an example is, I think we do International Council of Shopping Centers and NAOP and things like that,
Right.
but we don't have a presence at places like South by Southwest.
Yes.
And there's a mayor's track at South by Southwest now, and I saw that, man, there's a bunch of cities that are here showing their presence, and
Yeah.
I think we need to start looking at some of that.
Raleigh was one of them, and we organized that through the organization I led in Raleigh about taking everyone that was already going and combining that to create a splash and use it as a marketing approach. And I'm already in contact. There's already a couple people in Orlando that know they're going to be speaking and on panels next year. So we're going to try to bring that together under the campaign and then leverage a better presence.
Yeah, that's
South
great,
by.
because I spoke there, and there ended up being a whole bunch of Orlando people that came to the
Right.
presentation I did, and it's like, wow, if we just somehow had the synergy.
We're already
and
there.
had an Orlando presence on the trade show floor, whatever, I think we could move
Yeah.
the ball a little bit.
Yeah, we're already there. It's just a coordination.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, comments? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Is that you?
Sticking.
Here's Tom.
Welcome, General Baptiste.
Good morning, Mayor, Commission. It's a distinct pleasure to be in front of you today to talk a little bit about how the National Center for Simulation supports the simulation industry, but more importantly, supports our community. The mission is to promote, to protect, and to set the conditions to grow the $6 billion industry, modeling, simulation, and training industry in Florida. I do that through 4 strategic goals and objectives. The first is outreach, education, and advocacy, with a goal to recruit elected officials at every level and a certain number of civic leaders, influential civic leaders, to be the champions that support the NCS mission. And that become more clear as we talk about other things we do. We chair the Metro Orlando Defense Task Force, tasked with leading community efforts to mitigate the risk of base realignment and closure on NSA Orlando, which is the engine that drives the simulation industry. We promote diversification in the simulation industry towards sectors away from defense. We're very strong in defense. We've got 52 years of experience in supporting the defense industry. But what about all those other things you see on the chart there? There's an explosion of simulation application across every one of those sectors. And I think it's important to try to help our defense contractors become more diversified so that they're not so dependent on the defense budget, the cyclical nature of that, and they market their technologies in other directions. And lastly, we have to grow the workforce of tomorrow today. And so STEM education is critically important, and I'll talk about what we do there. So under each of those strategic goals and objectives, I'll outline some accomplishments over the last couple of years. I'm very, very, I have a lot of opportunities to talk to people, from the smallest copy clubs to the most influential boards of directors, to spread the gospel according to modeling, simulation, and training. Because this really was a very well-kept secret. Not only in Orlando, but certainly across the state of Florida, nobody knew it was here. I can go 2 blocks west of Alafaya Trail and say simulation, and you get a blank stare. So that's critically important. Outreach, education, advocacy can never stop. It has to be continuous. Over I came on board in January of 2010, and since then our membership has more than doubled. We were about 110 when I came on board. We're at 251 today. We worked very closely with Jacob Stewart before the partnership merged with the Orlando Economic Partnership to plan and deliver the message of modeling and simulation in civic leader fly-ins to DC. Since 2010, 2 of those fly-ins have been solely dedicated to the simulation story and what we needed to do to make sure that we solidify its presence here forevermore. And we've also, since 2012, been drive-ins to Tallahassee, have had a simulation message that civic leaders all took together. We encircled the Capitol. We went in every legislator's office. We told the story, and you'll see the results of that here a little bit later in the presentation. I've managed to put together a 12 CEO advisory group for Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy. We've met twice already. The objective is to hear what's going on in D.C. from her and then tee up issues that she can take back to D.C. to work on our behalf. And she's incredibly smart. She's got a great deal of experience in the Department of Defense, and she's been very, very active in a very short time as a freshman congressional leader. She sits on the House Armed Services Committee, she sits on the Readiness Subcommittee, and she sits on the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittees, all in the sweet spot of what simulation, training, and readiness is all about for the military. So she's perfectly postured. We plan to execute frequent tours not only to the research park, but to visit Team Orlando, NSA Orlando, and to visit our hometown university, to tell the story of collaboration and cooperation not found too many other places around. I mean, it's unbelievable how well we come together when the message is right and the priorities are set. And so I think, as I told you before, one of the best kept secrets in Florida is much better understood, not only here locally, but across our state. Under BRAC mitigation accomplishments, NCS led the formation with Dr. Hitt and the Orlando Economic Development Commission to stand up the Metro Orlando Defense Task Force in 2012. That was in parallel with Governor Scott's effort to stand up the Florida Defense Support Task Force, because he heard President Obama mention the word BRAC, that the SecDef had approached him, and that we need 2 more rounds of base realignment and closure to eliminate excess infrastructure. And I'll show you why that resonated with us and why the hair on the back of my neck stood up when I heard that. But we brought together a cross-section of stakeholders, which I'll show you on the next slide. Each identified a targeted financial commitment to finance our local efforts to mitigate the risk of BRAC. What the risk is that the base is overcrowded. It has been for a number of years. There's a 2,800 federal government workforce whose sole purpose in being in Orlando is to do advanced R&D and to release contracts to industry to buy simulation devices, training aids, and other technologies to support the training requirements of our 4 military services. So the MOD-TF mission has been solely focused on eliminating a reliance of 200,000 square feet of leased space at a cost of $5.4 million annually, because that's a critical BRAC vulnerability. It's just too easy to look and see who can't fit on a base and relies on $32 a square foot commercial space to live wherever that might be in the country. So here's the stakeholders of the Metro Orlando Defense Task Force. And what has happened over the last 4+ years, almost 5 years now, is pretty remarkable. Over 3 years, those assaults on Tallahassee resulted in $42 million in appropriations from 2013 to 2015. The sole purpose of those appropriations are to expand the partnership footprint within the research park so that we can relocate our federal workforce into a state-owned building that reduces their cost of occupancy in Orlando by 80%. From $32 a square foot, they move into a state-owned building. They pay for the common area maintenance of the space that they occupy, which works out to be about $5 to $7 a square foot. So the day that they move into that building and they're leased back that space, they save 80% of what they have been paying over the years to live in commercial space. Partnership 4A was acquired with a portion of the money. That's 84,000 square feet. It's the former SAIC building. This is it here. I'll talk more about opportunities that gives us to now have that building later. The second building is the Resource Square 2 building. We will close on that building on Halloween, the 31st of October. That gets us another 123,000 square feet, so 207,000 square feet total. gives us the opportunity to relocate our entire federal workforce, those Team Orlando tenants that can't fit on the base, into these partnership buildings and save ourselves $4 million annually in rent. That's the Resource Square 2 building. So I know the Army and the Air Force and the Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative and other small tenant organizations have better things to spend their money on in support of the warfighter than rent. To commercial real estate investment trusts that are run out of Wall Street. So this is a big deal, and we feel that this will mitigate any risk of adverse Team Orlando realignments if and when there is another BRAC. And President Trump has asked for 2 rounds of BRAC, the first being in 2021. So there's still a risk out there. The Congress has been very, very adamant about pushing back on another round of BRAC because of a sour taste in their mouth from the way the 2005 round was conducted. But there will be a round of BRAC. The excess infrastructure ranges from 20 to 28% across the 4 services. So that's money that they have to spend to maintain these buildings that are empty or partially empty, and is money that's diverted away from their real mission, and that's to keep our forces combat ready and ready to go anywhere when they're called. Under the diversification and tech transfer strategic pillar, we have just had our 3rd annual Florida Simulation Summit. It's co-hosted by Orange County Mayor Teresa Jacobs and the National Center for Simulation. Each of those 3 years, we've had more than 400 registrations, and we look at that as a way to raise the level of understanding of not only simulation practitioners, but the broader civic population, that there is an explosion in the use of simulation across many of those other sectors that I showed on a previous slide. And over those 3 years, we've had expert speakers and smart people come to this event and talk about how they utilize simulation in all of those sectors. In 2018, we looked to do a deeper dive into cyber training, and you'll understand why when I go to the next slide, and also the energy sector and how simulation applications are being used there. Under STEM, this is a remarkable story. I have a staff of 2. It's myself, a chief operating officer, and an executive assistant. We have 251 member companies. We have 100 volunteers on our Education and Workforce Development Committee, from education, from Team Orlando, the federal government folks, as well as from industry. They had developed a 4-year high school curriculum in modeling, simulation, and training that is available to any school in the state of Florida. The framework and standards are Florida Department of Ed approved, so it can be used at the high school level. That's been true for the last 3 years. This year it's been approved at the tech school level. And now Orange Technical College Mid-Florida campus will lead the charge to implement our curriculum. But it's available, it's on site. Anybody can use it. And Paul J. Haggerty High School at the high school level and Orange Technical College are in the process of taking that to the students and making it available to them. We've also got a Florida Department of Education approved certification program to give high school students and technical college students an entry-level certification in modeling and simulation. It gives them a little bit of a leg up when they're looking for an internship with industry. It gives a high school student a leg up for something to put on a piece of paper when they apply for college. We plan and execute Teach the Teacher programs every year, and we invite up to 40 teachers from across our area. The biggest challenge that we find is that we don't have the teachers to teach the technical material. If they're not a math teacher or they're not a science teacher, they're somewhat afraid. They're intimidated by wanting to teach robotics or digital media or simulation or other things that are entry-level engineering types of courses that are available across a number of schools in our area. So we try to raise their confidence. We do that free of charge. We bring together industry and academia to mentor and do these programs, and we've done very well in raising the level of at least people that are interested in being part of the technical solution in our high schools across the area. And you can see to date, in the first 12 months, we've certified 121 students and 24 teachers who have attained that entry-level modeling and simulation certification. We also plan a booth at the major conference of the year is called the Inter-Service Industry Training, Simulation, and Education Conference. It happens every year the first week after Thanksgiving. There's a STEM pavilion as part of that, and we host a booth, NCS hosts a booth, and we bring a school in and their students in to display the technology that they have developed in their either in-school or after-school programs, to show industry what young kids can do. It's unbelievable what they can do. And as I said, there's 100 volunteers that do this on my behalf. I can't take credit for the amazing accomplishments under STEM, but it's led by a pioneer in the simulation industry that's part of our Hall of Fame, and he has attracted 100+ volunteers. Near-term priorities. Of course, now that when we close on the next building, we need to complete the relocation of the federal workforce out of their commercial space into the partnership space, because that immediately will cut their cost. We can't move them. They have to do that. So you can understand this is not a happy time for the Army when they have to move from one building to the other. It's not a happy time for the Air Force for the same reasons. But when you look at it from a big picture, to save America $4 million a year, get moving. The problem is they have to budget, they have to plan, and it's moving slower than I would like to see, but we'll get this all done. The first building we bought has a high bay space on the bottom floor. That's the old SAIC building. That has the potential to be transformed into an advanced research and development and rapid prototyping facility that can support not only a very, very major Army program called Synthetic Training Environment, multi-billion-dollar program over the next decade, but there's another concept that they're about to roll out called Other Transaction Authority. It just happens to be OTA, just like the Orlando Tech Association. But the Other Transaction Authority has been around for a decade, and what it is it's a way to streamline the acquisition process. It's outside the federal acquisition regulation, which in many cases for a small startup, that's a barrier to entry to become a government contractor. Not only is it hard to do that, but you have to have a compliant accounting system that's very expensive, and you have to have a number of other things before you can be a government contractor. Under the Other Transaction Authority concept, members of the Orlando Tech Association, for a modest investment of $300 to $400 to be part of the consortia, can submit white papers and bid on projects for advanced R&D and rapid prototyping and become a government contractor without having to meet all those other things that they're required to be a major prime for a major government contractor. So I think that's a big opportunity out there that we've already broached it with the OTA here, Orlando Tech Association, but we'll follow up when they select a consortium management firm and we understand more and more about the articles of stand-up and all those kinds of things. We'll go back and see if we can't get them excited about being a part of that, because we need those non-traditional actors with great technology and great ideas to help us meet the challenges of training of the future. The Partnership 4 building, which will close on the 31st, the 4th floor of that building will be transformed into a secure compartmented information facility, a SCIF, which in the research park is grossly lacking. And when you think about cyber training, cyber defense, you get classified as soon as you say the next word. And so we need that secure facility, and that is an investment that the Army and the Department of Defense will make. If we had not bought this building, they would not have been able to do this. So they are invested. The state made the major investment in buying the building. They will now outfit that 4th floor in order to support that future and evolving cyber training environment program. And eventually, that 4th floor will house a national cyber range. Because think about this, how do you train a cyber warrior? You have to have them in a closed facility that's not going to turn off the electric grid. You have to do it in a closed system. You cannot do it on normal networks. So a cyber training range is going to be critical to the way we train the cyber workforce of the future. And those have to be proliferated across the United States, and one of those will be here. It's already here in a contractor facility, but it will be moved to the research park probably in 19. So the bottom line is, the funding that you provide, NCS supports all 4 of those strategic goals and objectives, and I think we're making wise use of your money and doing good things for our community.
Questions? Commissioner Stewart.
General, thank you so much. Would you just do me a favor and share a little bit about the medical connection? I had a chance to spend some time over at Florida Hospital and see the things that they were doing. And this, I know the military, and it's mind-boggling with what you're doing and how you're saving money in terms of what you can do with simulation.
Well,
but the medical side, we've got 2 great medical communities here that I think are really taking advantage of what's going on in simulation.
Well, I think the 2 biggest areas for explosion of simulation application are in education and medical simulation. The Department of Defense has long been the leader in finding simulation applications to support the training of medical providers. But we've been in war in the Middle East for 12, 13, 14 years now. So most of that focus has been on combat medics. It's the first responders. How do you keep the soldier alive long enough to evacuate them to a field hospital, eventually to Landstuhl in Germany, and then bring them home and rehabilitate them? So the Florida Hospital has probably been the most aggressive of the hospital systems in embracing the power of simulation as a way to train, a cost-effective way to train people, a way to train in a safe and secure environment where you don't hurt yourself or the patient. And I think they hired a former program manager out of the Army, Pat Connors, and he runs the simulation business for Florida Hospital. So you can see they put a premium on the future. But I think the good news about the Army is here in the Program Executive Officer for Simulation Training and Instrumentation, which is the Army command here. They have elevated a joint program office to a colonel level, which gives him more staff, more funding, more opportunity to branch out and lead the evolution in the way simulation is applied to medical. Yeah. So I'm hoping that at some point in time we can move away within military lines, move away from just training combat medics to training the people who take care of the soldiers' families in all those hospitals across the United States. So we also have the VA Medical Center in SimLearn. You know, the only simulation center in the entire VA system is here in Lake Nona, for good reason. This is the epicenter of the world for simulation and training. So it's here.
He was waiting for you to use the epicenter. Well, I talked to Mr. Connor and talked to him about simulation, and I guess he's been involved 15, 20 years in terms of this, and was sharing with me just in terms of his use, the evolution of the old days of, you know, you kind of had an arm and you tried to, you know, find a vein, and you know, then you went to an orange, and now he's got literally bodies that will talk to you, all in simulation, and it's incredible. And I'm thinking the same thing in terms of training of nurses, and it's just an incredible movement that I think is more than just a byproduct. It's a product of what's happening here in Orlando.
Absolutely.
Thank you, General.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Enns.
Thank you, Mayor. General, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for your presentation. And I'd like to say, too, that you are one of those young-looking people like Tim that were here presenting today. So I'll
tell you, my knees hurt.
But I just wanted to ask one question. The 2 buildings that you showed, where are they actually located?
They are in the research park.
Okay.
So when we started this process all the way back 5 years ago, one, we couldn't do anything because we didn't have any money until the first appropriation led by Speaker Crisafulli. But that first appropriation was for $8 million, which didn't get us really moving very fast because you can't make any commitments without the money in the bank. And now these are state-acquired buildings, so you have to follow their process. And we only had enough money just to basically start the dialogue around the research park. And we initially focused on trying to, one, buy a parcel of land and build a brand new building, and then talking to the owners of 2 other buildings that are totally occupied by the military out there. that was going to be our plan. Buy the land, put an option to buy one of those buildings and another option to buy the next one when we had yet another appropriation, and then start the building process when we had enough money to pay for the building. So that was kind of our moving in position. Well, we soon found out that the Wall Street Reinvestment Trust guys that own those buildings were just happy to play the short game and happy to keep their clients, and were not interested in selling. And one of the requirements of the governor is that he will buy no building for more than 90% of the lowest appraised value. Well, in a top 10 research park, you're not going to buy anything for a discount.
Right.
So we had a very, very difficult task ahead of us. And the agent for the Department of Economic Protection was myself and George Chiros. So we were the buyers. And we had to go out there, and we decided early on that we've got to get out of even thinking about building a structure, because it would cost us $100 a square foot more to build new than to acquire existing. The bad news was there was nothing for sale. The buildings we wanted, they wanted a 15% premium above the appraised value to even talk to us. So we had to go and approach other owners and tell them that if we fail, and there's a BRAC or there's a service decision to relocate even pieces and parts of Team Orlando, you don't want to own real estate in the research park. Because as soon as the people with the contracting authority start moving out, industry is going to leave too. And you can imagine what would happen to property values in the research park. The research park is built around the base. That's the anchor tenant. And that's the economic driver that has made it a top 10 research park. And so we finally were able to convince them, but the last step, it was easier to get the money appropriated than it was to get the governor and the cabinet to approve of the purchase. Because the final step was, when you were ready to sign a purchase and sale agreement, is you had to go before the governor and the cabinet and tell them, here's the building, here's the asking price, request your approval. In in the first building, we were only 1% below the appraised value. The second one, we were more 5% below. But the governor voted against it both times on a matter of principle. But he knew that his 3 cabinet members had already voted yes, so it was a done deal. Wow. But he voted against the acquisition of both those buildings, even though he said in his opening remarks, this is critically important and we got to do this. Wow. So, but because of we couldn't get the negotiated price any further below the appraised value than that, he voted no both times. But we were able to do it because the 3 cabinet members were thumbs up.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. It's definitely a breath of fresh air to hear you speak, General, because it reminds me of 5-paragraph order. When you do your report, you cover every single aspect in such a military way, which is a great way of listening to those reports. I met you through Colonel Ariza. Back then, is he one of your guys? Is he one of the ones?
No, he works for the VA.
Okay,
he works at Simlern out in the
same field.
Lake Nona.
We're still working together. I heard you talking about Congressman Murphy, which I know is a very talented lady, and she used to work in Washington. She's not trying to take our stuff to Seminole County, is she? Just kidding. The world of cyber security interests me a lot, and I know we're working on simulation more than anything else. Is cybersecurity the next big item here in the Central Florida region?
I think it has the potential to be, because the DoD has designated the Army Command here to lead all DoD efforts in the persistent cyber training environment. So it has the potential to be very big, I think. You can see by their decision to make that investment in the secure facility on the 4th floor of the 2nd building, that they're already moving in that direction. It's still a little early to really understand where PEO STRI is going, but they certainly have the mandate. And I think that bodes well for us. It's going to bring more attention here. It's going to bring more interest here, and potentially even more companies that are interested in being in that space to put a foothold here. If you want to be serious about simulation, you need a presence here.
The reason I'm asking you is because I want to tie in with the report that Mr. Giuliani was giving us earlier. Maybe that's a field, that's one of the industries that we also need to be targeting big time. Thank you, sir. Thank you, General.
Okay, thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you. Great presentation, General. I just want to know a little bit more about the certification program over at the Orlando Tech, if you can.
Okay.
And the qualifications.
Okay. The program was designed and submitted to the Florida Department of Education by the National Center for Simulation, Education, and Workforce Development Committee. The framework and standards were initially agreed at the high school level, and then they took us, and that's now under review, and they've taken now the next step to approve it at the technical school level. So we have a great relationship with the Mid-Florida campus of Orlando Technical College. They have that big motion capture facility there in their facility. They have a very aggressive simulation program. And so this gives them an opportunity not only to teach their students the principles of simulation, but also to give them an opportunity to get a certification while they're doing that. And that could be before they finish their program.
With that certification, is there opportunities there at the research centers for entry-level jobs with this certification?
I think there's two opportunities. The one is if you're seeking an internship with industry to try to pave the way toward an entry-level job, then that certification gives you a leg up because it tells an employer that you have at least an entry-level understanding of the principles of modeling and simulation. And then when you're done and you want to apply for a job, you now have something to offer the future employer that someone else may not have. So yes, I think it does provide an opportunity. It's something that it's not too painful to pursue. You've got to be able to understand and you've got to be able to pass an examination. But if you're serious about trying to reach that level, at least at the entry level, it's certainly doable. And we're starting to see more of a groundswell not only across our high schools, but also at the technical college level for people interested in taking that. And we want to go national with this. We want this to be a national program available to anyone who's interested in a potential career in the simulation industry.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, General.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. O'Neill, you're batting cleanup.
Still morning, so good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. It's great to be in front of you. I haven't been in front of you for a while, so I apologize for that. So I'd love to be able to update you on the great things going on at the incubator, actually more often. This is some pictures of the facility. It's about 6,400 square feet, 17 offices with shared reception, kitchen, break room for people to go hang out and really learn how to grow their companies is what the whole point of this exercise is down there. The goals, particularly, for this incubator is to be a leading supporter with the city, on their economic development initiatives and their goals to diversify the region's economy and help companies grow, succeed, and increase their chance of success as they go through the entrepreneurial journey. And it's a tough journey, right? As we know, we've got entrepreneurs in here, right? A bunch of them. I always tell the story. I quit high school to start my first company when I was just still a teenager. And didn't go to college until I was 25, so I understand what it means, but I was fearless then, so it was a little easier, right, to get through those times. But we really want to be a good asset for this community, when people think about the Orlando and they have this set of assets, we want this to be one of them. What do we actually provide? Adaptable spaces, an incubator is more of a process than a facility, but it does have facility, and that facility needs to help these entrepreneurs be successful. Flexible leases, they can come and go. They don't have to sign some long 5-year contract, and be committed to it. They can come and go month to month, if you will. Flexible spaces, too, they can grow. They can have 5 offices one week and 4 the next and 10 the next. We kind of accommodate these things as they grow and contract according to the market. We help them get access to the great people in this community, help them become successful, mentors, professional service providers, and again, the ones that do it nonprofit and profit. There are some shared areas in there they get to without having to buy their own. Again, it's a reception area, conference rooms, the network access, these kind of things that really would be onerous for, again, a small startup company. We help introduce them to people across the community, UCF people, faculty, interns. A lot of these students up there. At one point, we had more than 200 interns across the network. So the students enjoy it, and they get a whole lot of real-life experience for what it's like to be in a small startup company. And it's a good place to start. These, interesting, these statistics here, I've been quoting them for about 15 years. They go up 1 or 2 points, but that's about it, you know, back and forth. 87% of these companies are still in business 5 years after they graduate. 84% of them stay in the communities that they do. And again, if you help work on all the ecosystem, that 84% goes up even higher. Low cost per job, and typically, after it gets started and gains momentum, they generate more taxes than it costs to support these efforts. Overall, the numbers are big for the incubator network. Has a $2.5 billion impact on this region, $7.95 in taxes returned for every dollar of public investment, and it sustains more than 4,700 jobs. So we went away from jobs created to jobs sustained because people come and they go, and we just want to really know what's the net effect here for this region. 4,700 jobs. The Orlando incubator itself has about a regional impact of $235 million. It returns $8.69 for every dollar. And again, how these things grow. That was only $3.31 in the 2008 to 2014. And 691 jobs are sustained locally because of the efforts of the company's the incubator. We don't do it ourselves. They do it. It's the company's jobs. This facility itself has done really well. It's one of our higher performing facilities. It's had a waiting list for about 3 years. It's the smallest in terms of square footage and office space we have. It's been a great asset to the community in a number of ways. And let me just give you some other benefits we do over there. We have a veterans program where we bring veterans in and we teach them on Saturdays over a 15-week course. They come in and learn how to, transition to entrepreneurship life. And it's been very rewarding. It's one of the more things that, the things we do that I enjoy more. It's just kind of a heartfelt, good thing to do. And the entrepreneurs make you feel good about yourself for the things you can do for them. We have a soft landings program which helps companies from other countries come in here and test the market. So Orlando can be their entry point for penetrating North American markets. That's been a very successful program. We have 30 or 40 companies that have come into this region and expand their operations. Some actually move lock, stock, and barrel here. So that wasn't the intent, but it works sometimes because they find this community so engaging and helpful for their business. We were with Puerto Rico trying to help them with their economic situation before the hurricane. And we're trying to do a soft landing program for them where companies can expand here rather than just pack up and leave to Central Florida. We help them expand and do better, and vice versa. Hopefully some companies over here can go back to Puerto Rico and do business. We have visitors from all over the world, and again, maybe our attractions help play that, but we probably have 1 or 2 visitors a week come here from all different locations to see the incubator and tour the city and see how they can do business here with us in Orlando. Just some of our accomplishments. Again, you remember this, we were the Incubator of the Year in 2004. We have great graduates. They've received a lot of nominations and have won most of the time. I think we won all but once, and the only reason we didn't win that time was the 2 entries were from us, so which is a good day for us. But again, Technology Inc. Graduate of the Year, OpticRate. If you didn't hear from them, that's a 10-year overnight success. It was a company formed on technology at the research park. It just was acquired for $15 million. He's happy. We with the university had some equity for the technology, so we're happy. So good outcomes for everybody. We featured all the time in articles and magazines, and Orlando's featured prominently a way of coming here and figuring out how to make a great incubator program. And again, these just a few of our companies. This is really what we need to brag about. This Eagle 6. They just landed a new $50 million 5-year contract, veteran-owned business. They're going to hire 10 more people here. This is not in the statistics. I'm showing this is all just recent stuff. Wonderful outcome for them. Redcom, because of the FEMA and all the stuff with Hurricane Irma and the stuff, they just put 150 people to work in the last 3 weeks. So that's not in those numbers, but great for their business. Another disabled veteran service disabled veteran business. And 150 jobs, there's nothing to smock at. In Vivo, another Orlando company here in our incubator, they're a transportation engineering technology company. They just got a new $1.5 million contract with the Florida Department of Transportation. They're a certified, woman-owned certified disadvantaged enterprise, so very good for them. Helps with their bottom line. And Unikey, I don't know if you know Phil Dumas, he came out there in our incubator. He's a Shark Tank winner. He had the Sharks actually competing with each other for the money. He's raised $20 million in venture capital so far to find this thing. And if you don't know what he does, he's going to make it so you can get in your house with your cell phone. Unikey, just go there, a little app, and you touch your doorknob, and the doorknob opens because it knows who you are, and you can sign it for an hour to somebody else if you want to. So really his notion is to get rid of all your keys that are in your pocket and have it just be a cell phone. What do we do? Just a quick thing. This is an old slide, so forgive me if you've seen this before, but we get a new client in, and what we do is probably do a triage function with them. What can we really do to help them? They don't know what they don't know at that point. Typically, they're weak in sales and marketing and their finance plan, but they have a great product and they understand the intellectual property behind it, but really weak on cash and management and other things. So we do that stuff in partnership with the community. We have staff. We have people that volunteer and mentor. We have hundreds of people from this community that come help these companies at that point. And then what we do with that is we teach them how to focus. If you're familiar with entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, they have shiny object syndrome often, so you got to make sure they focus on their company, give them tactics, help them with the strategy, and really connect them with your Rolodex. And again, I use that term knowing that half the people now don't know what Rolodex means anymore, but we connect them with people they need to know, and hopefully they graduate typically in 2 to 5 years, and they have a much better plan, and they're usually outgrow us. You know, why they graduate? Because they need more space, they need to hire more people, and they need more facilities than we can provide. This is the actual facility. We opened it with 2,000 square feet and just 5 offices, and we were full, I think, day 2. We expanded that in 2009, now we're up to 17 offices. People talk a lot about ecosystems. This is my slide I did probably 9 years, let's see, 6 years ago. And the whole notion is you got to put the entrepreneur in the middle of an ecosystem if you really want to make it work. And you help surround them. And again, if you make those bubbles big enough that they can't get out, that's when you have a perfect ecosystem. Get the intellectual capital from the universities and the educational institutions and other people in this community that are smart that aren't part of that. The whole talent pool, everyone talks about talent. What did I do? Okay, well, I think I messed it up. All right, so, boom, 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 boom. Good thing I know how to use a computer, right? All right, so you surround them with talent. You know, if you can get talent, they'll stay here. Financial capital, we've been working on that forever. I think the mayor talked about that earlier. We have, with the university and other people in this community, created an angel network now, which actually led the state in investments last year. So good progress in that area, but much more will be done. And you get the service providers, you know, the professional and the nonprofit stuff, the incubators, accelerators, the scores and the SBDCs and the NECs. Everybody helping these entrepreneurs be sure you communicate well with each other in the system, you hand them off well, and get them to the people they need to know without running all around. And one thing we have strong is the advocates and champions, all the technical associations. The political sport's always been strong in this community, and it really makes it easier to do business here. And with that, I'll remind you how success is for an entrepreneur. It is an interesting path. It's not linear. It's not even, you know, exponential. It's just hard work. But, you know, at the end of hard work, they become successful. And with that, I'll take time out and ask for any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Questions, comments? Mr. Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. There we go. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dr. O'Neill. It's always a pleasure to listen to your reports and your statistics. Regional impact, $235 million, 8.69 return for every dollar invested. Mayor, this is one, well, actually 3 or 4 of many reasons why I'm determined to find the money to expand our incubator in our district. So I would like to work with our staff to see how we can find ways to get some money to expand. There's a great opportunity right now. We have the location, we have the space. I don't know if that's going to be there for too much longer. And I think what UCF, the incubation program, and Dr. O'Neill, Mr. Gordon, and all their staff, what they're doing is simply stated a job creation machine. And that's what we need here. And the variety, the diversity we have in terms of the jobs being created there is essential to our region. So I definitely like to meet with staff and with you, Mayor, later on to see how we can find ways
Okay,
to
thank you,
expand this
Commissioner
particular
Ortiz.
one. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Dr. O'Neill.
Thank you.
That will conclude our workshop for today.